So all day long, I deal with people and play with people and exercise with people who have a weak link in their back, and sometimes it's the upper back and sometimes it's the lower back. But the bottom line is a lot of people have back issues. So I want to go over in this video a bunch of the reasons why that happens and a bunch of the things to do to combat that. So we're going to show some exercises and we're going to have some big long explanations. So hunker down and settle in because I'm going to talk about some stuff here, okay? A lot of what happens with people, the reason why they have problems with their back is because of posture. Boy, you're going to hear me say this over and over again, but now we're getting down to the reasons. Its bottom line is pain sucks. And nobody likes to experience it, so we want to make it so pain goes away. The way that you do this is through proper alignment and posture. All day long when you're sitting, we have a tendency to do what I call hanging on my joints. Hanging on my joints, which makes my shoulders round forward, and then my spine is rounded and my head is forward. And that puts a lot of pressure on my mid and lower back. When you're sitting in a chair, if you're sitting in a chair, first of all, they talk about the new smoking is sitting in chairs. So consider not sitting in chairs. But if you have to, and you're obviously going to have to sit in a chair, don't use the back. Because watch what happens when I sit up against the back. I get that rounded posture very quickly and easily. But when I don't use the back of the chair, I have to sit in what's called a muscularly supported posture. Muscularly supported posture has a lot to do with alignment, so my ears are over my shoulders. Notice my head's not forward. If your head's forward, you got a 20-pound weight that's putting pressure right here. If my head's not forward and it's stacked, there's no pressure right here because I'm sitting in proper alignment and posture. So you need to sit up straight, and the way that you go about that is by not using the back of your chair. A lot of people sit on the ball when they are at work, and they think that that's going to help, and that only helps if you sit with proper alignment and posture. You can still sit on the ball with crappy posture, right? Head forward, sitting on the ball, I'm doing good things for my back. Not so much. So no matter if you're sitting on a chair or sitting on the ball, the chair means don't use the back, and the ball means proper alignment and posture. The biggest thing to remember when you're working is to keep your ears over your shoulders where they belong. And we can draw our shoulder blades down to do that, and draw our rib cage abs inward and upward to kind of keep that ears stacked over shoulders. We've got a lot of videos about these things I call the 4 points. So if you want to learn more about the 4 points, check out this link. The thing that we're going to be talking about when it comes to posture and carriage is muscular support. You got to keep your head in the game. And what happens is we get to work and we start working, we start thinking, and you start really concentrating, and then little by little you round yourself and you end up being here because you've been focused for 3 hours doing the same thing and you're seated. Then you go, what you need is reminders. And our girl Lauren, she's great at it. We've got computers. There's these great little reminders that pop up every 20 minutes. And they sit up straight, sit up straight. Or maybe put a little sticky note in front of your desk that says, sit up straight, little reminders. Because all that has to happen is you have to get into some of these old habits. And it has to do with this rounded posture. Shoulder blades in back pockets, ears over shoulders, long spine, and work from here. The next thing I want to talk about when it comes to all this sitting that we're doing is what happens and how does sitting cause low back problems. The biggest thing about that has to do with flexibility issues. Now, when you sit, there's a 90-degree angle in your hips, and that's called your hip flexors. So the hip flexors sit for a very long time in a shortened position, which means your hip flexors become short. When you're seated, the knees are flexed at 90 degrees angle too for a long period of time. So your hamstring get very short. So while we're sitting for long periods of time, the hip flexor and the hamstring muscles become short. Then when we go to stand up, those muscles being tight creates a situation where we can't even stand up straight, because which kind of adds to that rounded front posture. So I'm going to show you a couple of exercises to do to lengthen that hamstrings and the hip flexors. The biggest one that I do, this is an everyday thing because I used to be the guy that has that spot in my low back that was a chronic problem. I fixed that now, and it has everything to do with my daily habits. One thing I like to do daily is shower. And while I'm showering daily, I always stretch. And the biggest thing I do is stretch my hamstrings and my hips. So while I'm in the shower, I do a rounded front posture and I let that hot water just pound on my back. I actually crank the water all the way over to hot. And while that water is going down right on the middle of my back and around my hips, that's kind of like a nice warm up, right? Your muscles are a lot like taffy. So if you're waking up in the morning and they're stiff, and you get in the warm shower and you get the body temperature up, that taffy gets softer, and the taffy becomes more flexible. So it's a better situation when you're stretching. Use the shower's heat to do that, and then just cross one leg over the other, round all the way forward, and give it some time. I usually just hang until my knuckles touch, and it's amazing what happens when you. I'll be like this far off the floor when I start, like 10 inches off the floor, and if I just sit and breathe, they're the biggest muscles in our body and the longest muscles in our body, they stretch out quite a bit. So if you just give yourself the time in the shower, you cross one leg over, then you cross the other leg over, and you get those done every time you shower. So it's a great idea to do these habits, to put these habits in places where you already have things that you do daily anyway. Shower's one thing. The other one is a hip flexor stretch, and I just need to show you that one. We need to get down on the mat and stretch your hip flexors out. And I'll just show you that exercise here. The next thing that happens for a lot of people, and the reason why they throw their back out, is because of a combination of lifting and twisting. That's really not something we're supposed to do at the same time. There's this thing that's called unsupported front flexion, and it basically means that the weight's out in front of me and it's unsupported, so I don't have my muscles contracted. That's what that means. Unsupported front flexions means you're bending forward and your muscles aren't contracted. They're not stabilizing your spine. So the thing to remember is anytime you're going to be doing what's called unsupported front flexion, which is like picking up a bag of groceries or anything that you have to lift, first of all, you want to square yourself up straight onto it. Get down low, use the big muscles in your legs, but if you have to lean forward, you make sure that those muscles are contracted before you begin. I kind of imagine somebody's punching me in the gut. Every time I try and pick something up, right before I lift it, I imagine someone's punching me in the gut, and I clench those muscles in my stomach before I stand up. Whenever I'm working with people on standing up, it blows people away how easy standing up is if you do that stomach contraction first. And you basically learn that every time you do anything that involves extending your spine, you make sure that stomach muscle is tight, almost like someone's going to punch you in the gut, which means you got to tighten it pretty tight. Wham! That really helps. And then if you're gonna have to twist, you really need to make sure that you've got all the muscles stabilized first. And you don't want to twist when you're forward. You lift it up straight, and then you twist second. You got to break it down into two motions, not a continuous motion that involves lifting and twisting at the same time. That hurts a lot of backs. Okay, so to go over that again, we lean forward on the one plane with stabilized muscles, and we pick it up using the biggest muscles we have. And then if we have to twist, we do that second. We don't combine the two. So to wrap this whole thing up, we've basically got flexibility, we've got stabilization, and we've got lifting, not twisting, right? So flexibility is, once again, in the shower, in the morning, working on that flexibility. And then it's a good idea while you're still warm to go ahead and get those hip flexors stretched too. They're just as important as the hamstrings. You got to stretch those hip flexors out as well. The next thing is if you're standing at work a lot, make sure that when you're standing or sitting, you always use that upright, long spine carriage and posture, and keep that alignment with your head over your shoulders. The place where people tend to hurt themselves most is when they're getting up. So how many times do you get up and sit down in a chair? I want you to practice this and go over it. Remember I talked about the punch in the gut. Every time you stand up from a chair, you're going to lean forward just a little bit. And as you lean forward, you're going to tighten that stomach as you stand up. That's what I mean by stabilize before you move, okay? You're not rounding forward, you're hinging forward. That's a big point too. The difference between hinging and rounding is rounding forward is a slump forward posture. That's what happens when we're hanging on our joints. When you're leaning forward, you want to hinge at the hips with that long, stable spine and then stand up. So those are the three things I want you to really pay attention to that'll really help with making sure that you don't have a trick back.